All right, guys, welcome back to COVID Workshop, Whittling, Lesson 2. Today, we're going to take our stick and we're going to make some beads, okay? In this case, I mean just like a string of balls. It doesn't really matter what you make, but what it's good for is that you can make them for chess pieces, or maybe you want to just build a little collar around something. Maybe it's the head of a figure, something like this. In this case, I left a little bark on just as a stripe. I could do this all the way down the stick and that would be fine too. So this is what we're gonna make today. So, before I start, I'm gonna take out my whittling knife here, and as we learned, I'm just going to quickly give it a little polish here on the bottom of my coffee mug. And since I like to keep my knives really good and sharp already, this shouldn't take long at all. We're just going to kind of hone that edge down, test it on my nail, and that's good and sharp. So remember our point from last week? Here it is. Okay, remember, we're going to be using green wood. So you can get this from a willow tree or a willow branch, willow bush. You can get this from a piece of aspen or even a piece of pine, but you want to make sure it's coming off of a live tree and that the branch that you're using is also alive. It's not brittle, okay? So as I'm looking at this, I'm going to get rid of this little part here because it's got that knot. I'm going to make our ball right in this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just making myself a point just like I did last time. Okay, again, I'm being careful not to let my blades slip out. I'm doing nice controlled cuts. And I'm just going to go around making a point, kind of in this case below my point. And there it goes. So now I have this to work with. Okay, so that's how we're going to get started. Okay, so here we are. Well, first by making the top of this good and round. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my point and I'm just going to make it shallower and shallower. All right, until I get it almost flat across the front here. Something about like this, okay? So you can see that this is pretty nice and almost flat. It's rounded, okay? And now I'm gonna go around and I'm just gonna take off the square sides to make it even more round. And you can get really perfect with this if you want, but most of the time we are just whittling. Primarily, this is just an activity that can take up time if you happen to have any spare time. I always keep a little project in my pocket that I'm always kind of whittling on, so whenever I do have some downtime, I can just break it out and do a little whittling on it. Okay, and I'm taking off very small pieces here. In this case, I'm using my sheep's hoof or my sheep's foot. It's a very nice straight blade. Since I'm making round things, it's easier to work with a nice straight cut on a convex surface. All right, that's good enough for now. Okay, now I'm gonna do a side cut. So I'm gonna come in here about where I think this ball, if it was to go round, would come into about there. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna kind of press down pretty hard and I'm gonna roll the stick towards the hinge of where the knife is, okay? That way it's not likely to slip out, okay? I'm just gonna roll this along, making a pretty deep cut, okay? And I've gone all the way around the stick now. Now I'm going to do just kind of make a notch. Okay, I'm cutting down into the bottom of that cut. And I'm again just sort of, I've just tilted my blade a little bit. And I'm just cutting into the bottom of that notch. Okay. I don't need to worry too much about cleaning it up. And I'm going to do the same thing, being careful to come down about the same distance from my initial cut that I did on this top one up here. So it seems to be about 1/8 of an inch. None of this has to be real precise. And again, I'm making nice controlled cuts. And in this case, I'm pushing with my thumb here behind the cutting blade, or behind that cutting edge, and I'm sort of drawing the wood in with my fingers underneath the stick here to kind of keep a nice controlled cut. You'll notice that nothing is flying away here, okay? And I can go back around, and because we're dealing with both sides of the grain here, in this side of the stick, the grain is running towards my cut, and in this over here is running away from my cut. So I'm going to make cuts into the grain this way, or I should say with the grain this way, and with the grain this way, okay? What I mean by grain direction in this case is here's our stick, here's the end where our ball is here. And here's our notch that we've cut. So when I want to trim off, I need to go with the grain in this direction, okay, so that comes off, right? If I do that over here and I come up over here perhaps, then this whole piece will fly off, okay? And that's not what we want. You definitely want to come in going with the grain. So if I want to take off that little piece here, I'm going to come in this direction, going with the grain down here. If I'm on this side, I've got to think about which way the grain is running. So I need to come in from this direction here and cut that off here. If I'm over here and I'm trying to take off this little piece right here, I need to make sure that I'm going towards this cut. If this isn't yet attached, or if this isn't yet detached right here, if I make this cut and if this piece is still looking more like this and I make this cut here, it's likely to split all of that out, and that would be bad. Okay? So, bearing in mind that the grain, since we've made this little cut right here, this notch, this provides sort of a backstop to keep this piece here, if I'm cutting this off, keeping it coming out because it has this space to go into. If I need to make a deeper one, then I need to first come in and make some sort of a cut here so that this has some sort of a backstop so it can go out without splitting all of that. I'm gonna go all the way around here, just sort of cleaning some of that stuff out. Okay, now it's easy to get carried away with this part of the process and make this little notch too big and leave not enough wood to support our project as we're working on it. So you don't want to get carried away. Which, by the way, if somebody wanted to make a really cool project for the sake of the wood shop, you could whittle a chess set, which would be really, really neat, and it would be something that you would keep forever. All right, so there's my notch. You could see that if this was going to be, say, a pawn or a chess piece, this would be pretty close, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just come back. I'm taking really light cuts, sort of cutting off the corner of that initial cut, or I should say that initial notch cut. What this is doing is it is starting to round the ball off or turn it more into a ball shape, okay? I'm gonna do the same thing up here. And you remember, these are all real small controlled cuts. Nothing is crazy in this sport, and it doesn't matter if you take off just one little teeny little bit at a time because, well, primarily this is an activity designed to kind of waste time. And in this case, you're not really wasting it, you're just going very slow. And going slow is nice. Okay, and I'm just going to start pulling off all this bark very slowly, one little piece at a time. And, you know, let's say something comes up right now, I can put this in my pocket and pick it up again later when things slow back down. Okay, I'm going to come down here and get this side of it. If I wanted a decorative element, I could leave that bark there and it would become a bit of a stripe right around the middle. So now my ball has sort of become slightly cylindrical. Okay, and so I'm going to come back around. I'm just going to reestablish some more rounded shapes by pulling off any corners that look like they don't belong. If you end up doing this over a knot, you just have to pay a little closer attention to grain change and maybe make smaller cuts around that to accommodate that change. Okay. And now I'm going to start making this cut around the base of our ball just a little bit deeper. If you get too skinny too soon, all of a sudden it breaks off and that's sort of the end of the project. By the way, notice these little shavings right here? They could become a bit of a decorative element if that's what you want to do. One thing to know about them is that they're going to be very fragile once they dry, but I have seen a lot of really fantastic carvings where people made Christmas ornaments and things like that using those little shavings and kept them still attached to the wood and made really beautiful little whittling projects out of them. Okay, now I could come back through here and I could clean this up really nicely, but I'm just not too worried about it. And there is one little bead or one little ball. If it was an actual bead, I could trim it all the way off, sand it, and run a drill bit through it, and I would have an actual bead. So that is the project for this week. I'd like everybody, if you can, to A, make a point, and then make that point into a bead or more. All right? Send me pictures of what you got, and we will do that. Great. Thanks a lot, guys. Be safe. Have fun.